Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to Patreon Supporter Spotlight, or if you like, the Christmas Special. I had something particular in mind for this one, and in order to bring it about I had to delve back into the archives. So we have replays from 2 current patrons, but also 2 past patrons as well, so we've got a slightly Dickensian flavour going on. There will, however, be no ghosts involved, just very big guns, because the flavour of this episode is going to be Soviet Derp machines. So I've got 2 Su-152 replays and 2 KV-2 replays. We're kicking this off with this game from Redman 36. And this is quite an old one. This is patch 9.13, I think. So this is before we even had baked in damage counters to the game. If you wanted such things, you had to have mods, just in case you're wondering why it looks all a bit different. This is also a map that might be unfamiliar to some people, because it's not in the game anymore either. This is the, I forget the name, is it Hidden Valley? Something like that. It's basically a Korean themed map. That was complete overkill, by the way. He's starting off with his pair of heat shells that he's got loaded in this. And for a Walker Bulldog, I mean, yes, the one shot was quite satisfying, but a heat shell, definite overkill. Most of the shots in this one are, however, going to be pure HE derp. Because, well, that's where the fun is had with this machine. So, his second victim, I guess, the KV-3, not quite a one-shot, but another very big hit. And it's left them on not a lot of hit points, and considering they are reasonably well armoured, that should make it a bit easier for his allies to kill them. He is probably the only thing with any significant firepower on this flank. Although, actually, no, having said that, there is a T-34 as well. I misread that as a T-150 or something, but I don't think there is a T-150 in this game. So yeah, the T-34 has a big gun, so I take that back. But the ARL, not particularly. The Jagdpanther is okay, although it doesn't have a huge amount of pen, but it's still a pretty good gun for being a Tier 7 tank destroyer. It doesn't quite have the hitting power that this does, though. So it takes a punt at that T-34/100, but there isn't really enough time to lead the shell sufficiently, so that one misses by a margin. It also gets him spotted, because whilst you could use this position to be hull down and even in a non-turreted tank destroyer, it doesn't afford any particular cover from being spotted. And although this does have that magnetic gun mantlet that will sometimes suck in the shots that would otherwise pen you, that one very clearly didn't hit it. This is not looking so good. It's him and the Jagdpanther, and it's a Jagdpanther too. I am doing so well at reading the minmap. Okay, that really does have a bigger gun than a Jagdpanther. It's him and the Jagdpanther too now, just holding back the enemy from pushing the base. So really, he just has to hope his team can follow through to the enemy base where there is an IS-3A. That's how long the IS-3A has been in the game, by the way. It was kind of a low-key thing. I know it's obviously at the forefront of everyone's minds once again with Christmas and having been heavily buffed to the point of ridiculousness. Or, well, the ridiculous part isn't so much how it was buffed, it was the nature of the auto-loader, the mechanism that they gave it, where there was literally no downside to it having an auto-loader, which was, yeah, as I say, ridiculous. But back in this older version of the game, well, for a long time, it wasn't a tank that you saw around very much. I do actually have one myself, but it's on my NA account. I think it might actually have been a gift from Redman, I can't remember. So, at some point I might have to log into my NA account after many, many moons and maybe give it a go there, but I've not been in any particular rush to do so. So he takes out the light tank that tries to rush him, very nearly takes out his own CDC, who was maybe a little incautious in rushing in that close, wasn't quite paying attention to the fact that there was a big gun pointed at the back of that 87. But while this has all been going on, his team's been steadily capping, so it looks like they are going to comfortably win this one, and he's not going to have to deal with an IS-3 and that very low KV-3 whilst he is himself a one-shot. And maybe he could have done it, maybe he could have gotten some more damage out of this, but as it was, he didn't get the opportunity to find out because that was the win, and it was also an ace tanker to go with it. I'm not sad to see that map go. I have actually been playing rather more World of Tanks over the holidays even. In fact, it's probably the most World of Tanks I've played this year since the Frontlines mode was taken out, and that was back in what, April, May, something like that. And I just basically, you know, in the intervening gap, haven't played much at all. And there are some maps that are still in the game that I kind of wish weren't, or that weren't at high tiers. Mines, I'm looking at you. But this particular map, yeah, it wasn't hugely fun for the most part, despite the many variations it went through. So we're now on to another former patron, Sebedy. And I know this is slightly stretching the whole thing of this being a patron replay series, but both Sebedy and Redman were long-time patrons, and they were actually patrons in the kind of the topmost reward level as well. So I got to play with them myself many a time, and Redman especially definitely likes his troll guns. But he also rather got into World of Warships. He's one of those people that I don't know if I can entirely claim the credit for getting him into World of Warships, but I'm certainly one of the reasons why he tried it. Anyway, so we're going to start this one off in a very KV2 fashion. Sebedy just completely annihilating that Type 58. And having had that happen next to him, do we think the Skoda is going to be any more cautious? No is the answer to that one. So that's two medium tanks just done. Just done for. I mean, if you're in a medium tank and you're dicing with a KV2 in such a fashion, then yeah, you're kind of doing a risky thing, and you should know you're doing a risky thing, and nonetheless they did it anyway, and it was rather funny to observe. So a big old hit into the side of that OI, not enough to kill it outright, but that was still a fair chunk of damage. This is, again, an older game. I think this one is 0914, and I think this would have been before the OI had... I'm sure it got nerfed at some point. There were various nerfs, weren't there? But it was still a bit of a monster itself. It was basically the KV2 again, but with ridiculously good armour for its tier. The KV2's armour is not half bad. But it's not like there are things that can't pen the KV2. If you're side-scraping, it's fine, but the turret is a fairly big target, and with that big reload, if you're in a KV2 and alone in a position to get rushed, then you're probably not going to do so well. But with the OI, well, as it was, yeah, it had the armour to take quite a beating when it was top tier. So far, so reasonably good. They're down to the last couple of enemy tanks. But this is where this game is going to get, to be honest, a bit more awkward, a bit more drawn out. We had quite a amusing beginning with just outright deleting two medium tanks and then significantly hurting that OI, and he's now up to over 2,000 damage done. But despite there now only being a couple of tanks left, his team is going to start struggling a bit more to actually be decisive, to actually take advantage of the amount of numbers that they have in comparison. Although it's not a huge number of tanks extra, it's only 3 tanks extra, but that is usually enough extra firepower to really make things go in your favour. So, takes the flanking shot at the BDR and gets massively trolled by his gun, as does sometimes happen with the KV2. And if that happens with the KV2, then somebody just get some free shots at you, as the BDR did, although he's able to get himself into a position to angle and not at least take any damage from the second hit. He's also getting pelted by artillery all the while. And again, with this being an older version of the game, this is before the current version of Arty was implemented, because that wasn't until, what, patch 9.17, I want to say? It was something like that. Was it patch 9.15? I can't remember. But the Bishop in particular, well, it was the same gun as the Burt, the FE304. It just happened to be on a slower chassis. So it meant that you could fire at people and sometimes even permatrack them if they didn't have a particularly good repair skill. And it was also particularly accurate for an artillery. There was actually a game the other day, and I can't even remember what I was playing. I say the other day, it was probably a couple of days ago. I only just today finished doing all the winter grind stuff, at least to get to tier 10 of the festive decorations level, or whatever the heck it was. I'm not getting all of the festive camos or any such thing like that. But one of the games I was playing in, I can't even remember what it was, like the E2 or something. Maybe it was in the KV2, I don't know. But yeah, it was against a Bishop or an FE304, and they actually managed to hit me for over 400 damage, which is a massively rare thing these days. But back then, it really wasn't nearly so rare. If they managed to land shells on your engine deck, which they could do much more reliably than now, then those kind of hits were a lot more frequent. So that AMX is huddled behind the church, but they're slowly closing the net. It's now 4 versus 3. Including an old style, I think it was an old style ELC. When did the ELC change happen? I really can't remember now. I think it would have been an old style ELC, but I'm not entirely sure. But aside from the ELC, it is now just the Bishop. And maybe Zebedee will get to have his revenge. We shall see. Depends where the Bishop is exactly. They've not been spotted. The ELC was last spotted around the base area. Oh, yeah, no, there's the Bishop. Hey, Bishop. Yeah, this gun's bigger. Getting to nail the artillery that's been harassing you all game long, it is quite satisfying. As it turns out, the ELC has whizzed through the town and actually is now looking to take out the M44. But possibly the ELC wasn't full health, or possibly the M44 just landed a good hit because they actually managed to defend themselves. Otherwise it looked like they might have to try and cap. So that was an ace tanker, and actually the second gunmark game for Zebedee way back when. I don't even know if he's still playing tanks these days. Who knows? I don't know if he's even still watching my channel. I guess we'll find out in the comment section. But with the damage done, 2,500, 5 kills, almost a top gun. That put him quite clearly at the top of the team. And yes, it was really good matchmaking, but still, despite it looking like it was going to be a bit of a ruffle stomp relatively early on, it turned into a rather more drawn out affair all round. So a nice profit there, nearly 40k credits. That's not bad for a regular game. I've been completely coddled by the economy in warships. I mean, things cost a lot more in warships, but you can also just make so many more credits. And even with the bonuses from the Christmas stuff going on, I'd forgotten how little credits comparatively you make in World of Tanks, how much of a grind it can be, even with a premium account. Although partly that's because I've been shying away from playing lots and lots of my tier 8 premiums, because tier 8 is not a good tier right now, not at all. So, on to our next replay, and this time it is Menthel once again in an SU-152, or rather it's the SU-152 that is once again rather than Menthel. I actually told a slight inadvertent fib earlier. Well, not really a fib, it's just a funny coincidence in the scheme of things. In the little break I had between recording the previous segment and this one, and I know I don't normally make it obvious where the breaks are, but you know, you talk for a while and it's a good idea to stop and have a sip of water, or in this case a cup of tea. Because if your throat gets too dry, then... well, if you've ever tried speaking with a really dry throat, you'll know it's not a pleasant experience. But I just happened to glance at Twitter, and lo and behold, there was a message from Redman saying he's planning to become a patron in January once again. So, yeah, that is quite the coincidence. Really quite the coincidence. Back to this replay, however. So this is, as I said, Menthol, and it's the original version of the Pilsen map. This side doesn't look too different, although it does a bit. The middle changed a bit as well, but probably the biggest change overall was over on the eastern flank of the map, where it is rather different indeed. Most of the action here is, however, going to be taking place around the base, because as you can see, his team has more or less totally neglected the east side of the map. They're all focused over here. And they've just ceded a huge amount of map control to the enemy team. And the enemy team is taking full advantage of that. They have pushed across. They are now threatening the enemy base. And we're only just coming up to the 3-minute mark. The enemy top tier platoon of M4A1 Revs is also being really very aggressive. But given the matchmaking, it's not a totally terrible idea. There's not really a lot of armour in play in this one. This team did have a KV-4, and the other team had a Lerva and a Tiger 2. But they're all dead already, so it's basically just the squashier mediums. Although there is still an IS alive and kicking, but the armour on that is... I mean, it's pretty decent, but it's not going to hold up that well when they're not top tier. And even when you are top tier, there are plenty of things that can punch through the IS armour. So Menthol takes the opportunity to move up, plants one in the rear of that M4A1 Rev. Yeah, people. There are times when I miss Caption Guy, when I'm sure all of you has missed Caption Guy. But anyway, you'll just have to make up your own captions in your head. And although initially it looks like he's going to be able to, you know, push up and support, it turns out everybody else that went forward pretty much died, so she's not looking great right now. The enemy team has done fairly well for themselves on this flank, despite this being nearly the entirety of Menthol's team, and they're now also threatening the base. That there, by the way, that had to be a bit disappointing, not just outright one-shotting the CDC on that amount of health, but clearly the tracks caught it. So although it did enough damage to stop the CDC wanting to engage him again, they are still alive to fight another day, or at least for another few minutes anyway. At this stage, a really unexpected thing happens. One of the enemy artillery gets spotted here. I don't know why the M12 decided to just trundle down the 3 line like this. I don't particularly know what they were hoping to accomplish. Playing tank destroyer at this stage was not going to get them very far. And so, although I think maybe they landed a hit on, did some damage to that GW Tiger P, didn't really do anything ultimately other than give their own tank away. So, I don't know. There's just 3 of them left now versus 4. And I think, honestly, Menthol misplays it a little bit in this one from this stage. He goes to help the FV with the E25, when, honestly, I don't think the FV needed any help with the E25. This has left the CDC alone and unsupported and a one-shot. And even though the CDC would probably die if Menthol was there anyway, he would at least get in a hit on somebody in the process, theoretically. There is still that full health, well no, actually not quite full health, but quite high health M4A1. And although, again, he could be doing the same thing with the FV, he could be supporting the FV, he isn't. And so, although, yeah, he is stopping someone from driving around behind the FV by driving down this line, which is maybe what Menthol has in mind, they could easily just rush the FV, because the FV doesn't have a particularly hard-hitting gun. It's got very good penetration for being a tier 8 medium, but it does not particularly have a high amount of damage. So unless somebody comes into Menthal's line of view right now, the FV is looking like he's in a pretty dicey position. And in fact, now we know where both these remaining enemy mediums are. Menthal could be going forwards right now. He could be himself trying to get the flanking shot, although it would be certainly a risky manoeuvre. But these are low health tanks, and in fact the FV did just take out the T-34/100, but gets taken out himself in the process by the Rev. So it's not gone as badly as maybe it could have, because it could be him facing 2 medium tanks right now, but the FV did at least take out one of them. But if he'd been positioned a bit further forwards, I think he could have provided some more active support there. And as it was, he wasn't able to support the FV wasn't able to support him, they couldn't watch each other's backs, and it's now him versus, well, both the Rev and the remaining artillery. The Rev had a pretty good idea where he was, popped out, actually managed to take a shot at him. He can take at least one more hit from this guy, a penning hit, but the Rev is going to take at least one, if not, well, no, one shot would be good, but he's going to take, I think, at least 2, unless he gets lucky. I think he might be firing heat, I don't know. This is the thing with this particular replay. This is a 917 playing on the 917.1 client, and they made an interface change between the two. And so you can play the 917 replays on the 917.1 client, but for some reason ammunition doesn't show up. And the various damage logs and things don't show up either. So we don't know what ammo he's firing. A heat shell would definitely pen. An HE shell would maybe pen. But he kind of misses his opportunity again. He almost got off a shot earlier. He could have gotten off a shot earlier and didn't. And then, well, he hits the turret at least. He's now taken down the Rev to less health. But the Rev really has to give him side armor. Fortunately for him, the Rev does. So that was very useful. I don't quite know what the Rev was attempting there, to be honest. They almost certainly had a better view range than Menthal did. They almost certainly could have outspotted him, worked their way further around. It's not like this was, you know, the last minute of battle or anything like that. Instead, they just tried to rush him face on, and it really didn't work out. So the last tank left is the RT, who appears to be AFK. This could have been certainly harder if Menthal had been being peppered by artillery. Maybe that's why the Rev charged him, because he knew he didn't have an ART backup. If he'd been able to spot for RT, and RT had been able to hit Menthal, this might have gone very differently. But as it was, no, 3,500 damage, nearly 3.6k damage later. He is the last one standing and has secured the victory. So, despite that, again, being a very messy game, a very, very messy game, Menthal was able to come out on top and derp a fair few things in the process. But although that was an okay game, it wasn't without maybe 1 or 2 misplays. I feel like I've definitely saved the best for last. This is Malwo in a platoon of KV2s with Maxwell there and Caspian Piper, who is also a regular on Maxwell's stream. Maxwell streams tanks and other games, if you are unaware. And I might even, if I remember, throw in a link to his Twitch down below. He does a lot more on Twitch than he does on YouTube, but he also does have a YouTube channel as well. So this is a bit of a troll platoon. He doesn't play tanks that often anymore. I think it's Fridays is his regular tanks days. And it tends to be stuff like this, because if you're playing a lot of World of Tanks at a stretch, it tends to be, I mean, for a lot of people, it tends to be whatever you can cope with. And if you're playing a lot of KV2, that can be easier to cope with than tanks that can be more frustrating to play. We're going to have a little interlude first, however, with this AMX-12T, who has managed to get themselves upended on this rock. We also have a very early end to this game for Maxwell, who gets derped from full health by an enemy KV2. this is rather going to set the tone for this particular round, I feel. So Maxwell's out of it. Caspian's still there, though. The Tiger's pressed forwards a bit. The enemy team, as you've no doubt by this point noticed, has their own KV-2 platoon, although there are only 2 of them. But hell, there's now only 2 of this platoon left as well. And although Mao is, I mean, he's doing the nice thing. He's doing the you know, the very team-oriented thing right now and helping the scout tank get back on their feet so they can actually go and help out. But this is all detracting from the amount of time he is spending actually fighting the enemy team. This is one of the things that it would be nice if World of Tanks would take a cue from War Thunder, because there's the whole tow rope system in War Thunder and it works really well. It just isn't in World of Tanks, however. If somebody gets themselves upended like that, then if they're on their side they can get nudged over, but otherwise they're just completely screwed, and you then do rely on a teammate to come and try and help you over. And sometimes that then results in the person that's trying to help getting a team damage penalty. So the whole thing is, yeah, it's a bit awkward. The fact that you can flip a tank, but you can't then unflip it sometimes without getting punished. So Caspian is unfortunately now down as well, leaving Mao pretty much alone apart from the T-21 and the 12T. He has, however, just managed to one-shot that heavy tank number 6 from almost full health. That was just an HE shell straight through the side. The HTC, well, they are easily low health enough that a much smaller caliber HE shell would do the trick. But this is the KV-2, we don't do small caliber. I mean, yes, you can theoretically mount the 107mm, but why would you? So that leaves him alone with 2 KV-2s and the VK. Well, actually, no, he's not alone. The T-21's still alive. I take it back. There's a trick to one-shotting another KV-2. And it wasn't quite a one-shot from full health, but that was still a penning hit. The strip of armour on the turret above and below the gun, hell, even the turret roof, if you can hit that and RNG grants you a high enough penetration roll, then that's the ball game. You used to also be able to, with the old KV-1S when that was at tier 6, get the lower front plate sometimes with the HE shell and one-shot them. It was basically the perfect counter to what was at the time the biggest, nastiest tier 6 heavy tank, because it had that 390 Alpha 122mm gun. Not quite a one-shot that time, but a significant amount of damage. If he can get another hit, he'll almost certainly kill that KV-2. The VK is also pressed up, however, so that might be worth trying to shave a bit of health off. The rest of the map, it's been a bit of a mess. Fisherman's Bay. Again, this is I think this is 920. This is a much more recent replay, but it's like 921 or something. All of the maps I've featured in this video have either been taken out of the game or changed in some way. This is definitely not the form Fisherman's Bay is in these days. So yeah, it's been, you know, the usual thing happened on the 1-2-3 line. It's come down to fairly equal numbers of tanks versus each other. And although one of them is a box tank, they haven't actually been a big factor. They're probably still up in that northwest corner, but you never know. That A44, by the way, they're going to whiz around and do a lot of things on very low health, all things considered. So, Mao presses across the middle, hoping to maybe help intercept the A44. The Su-100M1, meanwhile, has continued up along the coastline and is now trying to take out the artillery. As for the box tank, well, there we go. Mao spots them. Turns out they are not in the northwest corner at all anymore, and that thing actually goes in a reasonable speed in a straight line, but it also turns like an oil tanker, so not the most manoeuvrable tank, all things told. But this is something he has to deal with. He can't really go chasing after the A44 and ignore getting an SU-100Y shell up the butt, because he would not enjoy that at all. The SU-100M1, meanwhile, spots one of the arties and allows them to be taken out by their Hummels. They are unfortunately, however, going to run into the A44 again. Spotting the Hummels obviously got them spotted, and so the A44 was able to take them out without getting spotted themselves. Meanwhile, where's the box tank gone? It's a very good question. Mao really doesn't want to get caught by surprise. However, fortunately, it is not he that is caught by surprise, it's the box tank, who turned around, went back up that path again, and gave Mao a perfect shot into their broadside. That thing doesn't have a lot of side armour. Unless it went into the tracks, that was going to be a pen. It wasn't a fully aimed shot, though. RNG was definitely being a bit kind to him there. So at that stage, all that's left is the low health A44, who tries to side scrape against a KV2. That was never going to work well, certainly not with that health. And that lets Mao come out on top again with the ace tanker. I think it's all been ace tankers with these particular replays. 3,500 damage and a top gun. Not too shabby at all. In fact, almost 1,500 base XP. I think that's the best amount of base XP we had in that particular game, or of any of the replays I've shown. So I'm going to finish this video up by, well, wishing you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, because of course 'tis the season. Thank you all for watching me for yet another year, and a particular thanks to all of my supporters on Patreon, because it keeps the lights on. I couldn't do this without Patreon. YouTube pays not a lot between the people who ad block and the collapsing ad revenues anyway. So yeah, particular thanks to everyone who just supports me doing what I do, and I really couldn't keep doing this without you guys and gals. So big thumbs up, pat yourselves on the back. So hopefully you have enjoyed my Merry Derpmas special, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.